I am Marcy Williams, the Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Nonprofit Organizations. In response to the numerous requests that we've had regarding fundraising during these trying times, we wanted to bring you some solutions from experts in the industry and provide you with some helpful tips. It's my pleasure to introduce Beth Short of the Ohio Attorney General's Charitable Law Section.
Thank you, Marcy. We just conducted a statewide survey of charities, and 7,700 charities responded, and one of their very top concerns is what to do during this public health emergency that we're all experiencing in terms of trying to replace lost revenues, funds from events that they've had to cancel, and just the general change that society is undergoing right now. And so this is a top concern for charities throughout the state. And so I'm grateful for Oano for your willingness to put this together, as well as for our participants. And I especially want to thank Marcy and Elaine, who is one of our experts that we'll be calling on, because they both serve on the Attorney General's Charitable Advisory Council, which gives us great information about what's going on in the real world out there. And so special salute to Marcy and Elaine for their ongoing efforts to keep our office clued into what's the pulse of the whole entire sector of charities that are doing great things in Ohio. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And Beth, could you introduce Elaine?
Yes, please. Let me introduce Elaine Pierce, who again is on our Charitable Advisory Council. She comes with a great background of all kinds of experience within the charitable sector, particularly in fundraising. And most recently, she worked at the James Cancer Hospital at Ohio State and is now serving as a consultant working with a number of different types of organizations to fine-tune their fundraising approaches. And so, Elaine, thank you for bringing that experience every day to the work that we do in the Charitable Advisory Council in our office. So thanks for being willing to share your expertise.
And I would like to introduce Michelle Kramer.
It's great to partner with.
I'd like to introduce Michelle Kramer. Michelle is a certified fundraising executive, or as we know it, CFRE, and is the president and CEO of Kramer and Associates. She's an AFP master trainer. Since 1987, her firm has provided philanthropic counsel to nonprofits, foundations, and corporations, and is one of the largest female minority-owned fundraising consulting firms in the country. Michelle is also a member of Oano's Council of Consultants. So we want to thank you both so much for joining us. And I'd like to start out with asking what both of you are seeing in the field when it comes to nonprofits and fundraising. So let's start with Michelle.
Thank you, Marcy. Well, first of all, let's talk about when this all happened and just that feeling of shock and awe that took place within each nonprofit. Not only the nonprofits, but everyone. I can tell you, even in our own firm, it was just this shock, and everyone was trying to identify, what do we do and how do we, really position ourselves to move forward and advance our missions. So, but I think what we're seeing now is that nonprofits are being innovative, and they're thinking creatively in terms of how they can fulfill their missions. We're seeing teams start to come together and really come together with ideas and solutions for how they're going to serve those that they care about. So we're moving in a better direction, but there's still a great deal of concern with regard to the layoffs that we're seeing. And a lot of the boards have concerns, as well as the finance committee. So we're hopefully moving in a better direction, but we've got to have the teams and the boards come together for solutions.
And Elaine?
If I would just piggyback on that, Michelle, and say that I think there was, everyone scrambled to figure out how to redo the workplace, to work remotely, bring as many of their staff as they could home, and continue their mission. and in some cases having to reinvent, having to pivot on what they had done. So many examples of the nimbleness of our nonprofits in Ohio to adjust. I think what I'm seeing now is a little bit of the what's next and how long. I think a lot of us in the beginning thought, well, this is 2 or 3 weeks, we'll hunker down and then we'll be back to normal. And I think that we're all looking at what that new normal is.
No, I would totally agree. And I think that new normal, I mean, just how we're all using technology and Zoom, I wouldn't be surprised moving forward if you were to email a potential donor and say, hey, I'd like to schedule a meeting to talk about a program or this or that. And then that donor emailing back and saying, hey, that's a great idea. As opposed to meeting, why don't we think about setting up a Zoom? I think this technology is going to have to be embraced. It's so convenient. And
Yep.
Can you really still build those relationships via the technology? I think we're still working on it, but I believe it can still be done. But there's nothing like being face-to-face with someone. But no, thank God for the Zoom.
Yes.
Well, that kind of leads to my next question. We've been advising charities that just because things are different and we may have closed offices, we may have closed and even called off programming and services that are provided, is no time to sit back and take a break and do nothing until we wait to decide what happens next. We've been talking about the importance for them to communicate with board members, with donors, with beneficiaries of their programs. Do you think that communication is an important strategy that charities ought to be embracing now? Elaine, what do you think?
I could not agree more, Beth. And in fact, I think it's probably the most important thing that we can do is continue to build relationships with your donors. Because let me tell you, if you don't, somebody else will. And your donors are feeling the same kinds of concerns and worries that you are. And they need to be heard. They need the opportunity to talk to you. They want to know what, especially those who have already supported you, what are you folks doing right now? How are you handling this pandemic, this once in 100 years event that we're having? Let's hope it's once in 100 years. So I think communicating, and as Michelle said, I think we've all got these little computers and there's an app on here that's called a phone. And we can call donors, something that I think a lot of us have gone to, emails and texts. People want to hear a voice. A lot of our folks, especially older folks, are lonely. They want to hear from you. And if you kind of, well, I don't know what to say, call and listen. Listen to how they're doing. Check in. You honestly, you can't do enough of that.
Michelle?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think some folks are taking advantage of this in a negative way by saying, oh, I don't want to call that donor because I don't want to bother him. They're at home. Or, it'd be better if I emailed. I compared to like when my children were growing up and they had the binkies, pacifiers. And sometimes you just got to rip that binky off. And you have to pick up the phone.
Yep.
These donors want to hear your voice. There's nothing like a voice. They can hear your compassion. They can hear what's going on as opposed to reading an email or a text. So I really think that development officers and executive directors have got to pick up that phone and be courageous and do it every single day. Let those donors know you're thinking about them, and ask them how they're doing. Share with them some of the pivots and the changes that you're taking place within your organization to show them that you're not hunkered down, but you're being innovative and you're taking charge. During a crisis is when real leaders step up. So show them your organization's leading the way and you are not hunkered down, but going forward and being positive.
Would you also say that that applies to letting the community at large know how your organization is responding?
Absolutely.
Not just your donors, but those who care about and rely on the organization?
Absolutely. Any channels that you can use, old-fashioned newspaper, press releases, or, local papers, Instagram, Facebook. There's so many ways, and another, we're talking about phone calls, and I would also say the old-fashioned thank you note or letter. And I know of one development officer who every Friday is choosing a different donor and sending a lovely floral arrangement. Not expensive, and she has had more comments, it's just thinking of you. She's got pictures of the bouquets. There are so many little things you can do that will brighten someone's day and remind them that, oh yes, there's someone I support and care about.
Great.
We know that many charities have had to furlough staff, including development staff. And what are you hearing about how nonprofits and organizations are navigating this period and how it is affecting their staff? Michelle?
Wow. I'll tell you what, leaders, CEOs really need to step up right now. Teams, management teams, your entire nonprofit, they need to be led. And just because your title may not say CEO or executive director, for those of you whose CEOs aren't stepping up, you might need to take that lead, because it's so critical that someone develops a plan, a short-term plan. Huddles brings the team together. They're working from home. They're siloed. I mean, that's something that we see all too often, and it's the silos in nonprofits. And so with everyone working from home, it makes it even harder. So one of the things that we're recommending is that management teams have a 30-minute huddle every single day. How's your day going? How are we moving in this direction? It really creates this sense of unity and collaboration. And, there's a lot of times when maybe you're gonna, talk about the kids, or because that whole professionalism now, I think, is kind of thrown out the door. We're seeing each other's kids in the background. You're hearing my dog bark, and you know what? I think that's some of the good that's going to come out of this as a result. There's going to be a more personal team building that's taking place that I want to embrace, that all of us, I think, need to embrace and again, tear down the silos. So
I would, in terms of furloughing staff, Marcy, I know that that's happened, especially with organizations who rely on admission fees, who don't have the endowment deep pockets that some of our larger nonprofits have. And that's devastating, that's tough. I really think that we'll come through this. I think we'll also see the organizations that maybe didn't have a strong financial footing, just as we're seeing in the for-profit world, those places that are closing their doors, who, even before the pandemic, were on a little bit of shaky ground. But, and I would say that you've got to remember that development and fundraising is not just the person who has the fundraising hat. And especially with smaller organizations, it needs to be embraced by everyone. And that might be a leaner staff to get through this time. But I'm really confident that we'll come out of this, in most cases, stronger. People are really innovative, and they'll come through it. But it's tough, no doubt.
We've been talking about layoffs and development staffs and that sort of thing, but the reality is that most charities in Ohio are small. Almost half of them have assets under $30,000. So layoffs aren't an issue that they've had to confront,
Right.
but they also don't have much cushion, much wiggle room, or many resources to deploy even before the pandemic. So I'm wondering if you could offer some ideas or feedback for some of those small charities who they may be small, but they're mighty, and deliver some programs that people are really reliant on. And so could you talk a little bit about that world of the small charity where every board member is a doer, and they need to, all hands on board, particularly now?
Beth, those are such great questions. And I think your board, and let's even the smallest folks have a board, and you've got to get those folks together, remind them of the mission. Your volunteers can often be key. We talk about in fundraising, we talk about time, talent, treasure, and it's as old as the hills, but the true, those are your folks. If let's say you're parking cars for football games, and you've got your volunteers, those might be folks to say, at this point we need you more than ever, and we might not be able to have that one event this year. Would you consider making a gift instead of what you were doing as a volunteer? Or maybe bring your volunteers in, and they might be able to help fulfill the mission if you've had to lay off, or if you're short with staff. But I would really stick with the tried and true. I would, technology is available to small folks, as Zoom. Anyone can do Zoom now, right? It's 40 minutes free, but it's not super expensive to get a Zoom account. Try some virtual tours on Zoom. We're going to take you behind the scenes and show you how we put together a fundraiser, or something like that. Try those things, but just remember to keep your friends close. Keep those folks close. You'll get through this. You'll come across the other side. And look at the long range. This is not going to be forever, we hope, right? We're not going to be social distancing forever. I hope.
I hope not too.
Oh.
Michelle, do you have any words of wisdom for our smallest groups out there who are struggling?
I'm big on teams. I'm big on folks coming together. So let's, for example, a booster club. Why couldn't you assemble presidents of the booster clubs from a region, or and talk daily, talk weekly, come together and share ideas and brainstorm. You need to build your own team, your own C-suite, right, your own, coaching each other and lifting one another up, because it can get lonely. It can get lonely when you're, especially being at home. So, with this wonderful technology, it's all at your fingertips, and you can bring so many people together. You could reach out regionally, you could reach out statewide. So it's really reaching out and inviting and saying, let's come together as a sector for whatever that smaller nonprofit organization is. That is my best advice, really, because that way you can get so many more ideas. And then, you have some mentors, you have coaches within that group that you can turn to.
I think that's something the charitable sector at large has not been very good at, working together collaboratively, because we often see people as competitors for donor dollars. But when we come together strategically, 2 + 2 can be 5,
yes,
instead of just working on our own.
I think that idea of the booster clubs in Northeast Ohio or whatever, what is your school doing? Could we get some tips of the trade from you? Because you do have different donor audiences there. You really aren't competing. And, and a tried and true also in development is your best donors are the folks who just gave. So be sure to thank them. Thank them, thank them. Everyone wants to be thanked, right?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also think that everyone in the organization is part of the development as well.
You bet.
Including board members. And we need to stay in constant communication with our board, and our board members need to reach out to the organization and check on them and see if there's anything they can help with development. Great advice so far, but can each of you give us your top 3 fundraising or development tips that an organization can implement today? Michelle?
Well, I would recommend that you develop a short-term plan if you don't already have one. I think too many nonprofits, again, are trying to, live in the moment right now, trying to take care of today or tomorrow, but developing that short-term plan, bringing perhaps your management team together, asking each of them to come to the table via Zoom with their ideas as well as their recommendations. And then you can have a virtual retreat, have them bring those forward, and then create a pivot plan map that will identify everyone's in sync. We're all going to move in this direction, and then follow that map. And again, those 30-minute huddles to hold one another accountable, to connect, and to build a stronger sense of team. Again, it's so important that folks are communicating with one another as well as to the donors, but those organizations that have the strongest sense of camaraderie and I've got your back, and they know what one another's doing and they're coming together, game changer. They are a game changer in terms of fundraising and communications and finance. So it's developing a pivot plan, and that's one of the things that our firm has done, and we strongly advocate for that. So those are, break them down into 3.
So, I've thought about this quite a while since you gave this challenge to Michelle and me. And anyone ever been around a realtor and you ask a realtor, what's the most important thing in choosing a house? And they'll tell you location, location, location. Well, I'm going to cheat a little, because in my mind, the most important thing that you can do is relationships, relationships, relationships. Steward your donors. And we've talked a lot about this in this webinar because it's the most important thing you're going to do. So that's my kind of cheating way to say relationships, relationships, relationships. But to actually give you 3, and I really like Michelle's, develop a plan. And if you write stuff down, you can go back and look, okay, on May 1st, I said this. What have we done? I'm going to put relationships in there. And then I think the last one, and we haven't talked about this much, is take some time for yourself, some self-care. And that should be for your team too, if you've got a team. And I'm guessing Michelle has some great ideas on that front, but take a walk, get up, sometimes these Zoom calls, you get Zoom fatigue. Go. Now, I wouldn't recommend it today. If you're watching this later, it's raining, 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 but take a walk on a nice day. Clear your head from work, because now that most of us are home, work doesn't stop. It's always there. So those are mine.
Elaine, it's so funny that you said that, because when all of this started and we started working from home, I was losing a sense of time. It was like from one Zoom meeting to the next. And finally I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't eat lunch, and it was, and I think you've heard probably Zoom fatigue. I mean,
have.
it was like Zoom fatigue on steroids. And so after about 2 weeks, I actually sent an invite to each one of my staff, and it said, it was Monday through Friday from 12 to 1:30, and it said, eat and exercise. And I said, each of us know that during that time, we are not to email, we are not to call. We have to focus and fill up our cups before we can, be good for our clients. And so it's one of the things that we've tried to stick to, not all the time, but if you have it on your calendar, you'll keep it. It's right there, and you'll work around the meetings on that. So that was one of the things I did. I'm so glad I did.
Good for your clients, good for your family, good for your dog. How many, I walk the dog, dogs are loving this.
I know it. One thing I'm going to miss is not having my dogs around. But I'm going to bring them to the office too.
There you go.
There's that comfort thing. They're amazing.
Well, those are good tips, actually. before, during, and after a pandemic about being mindful of self-care. Although I myself am yearning to get back and having eyeball-to-eyeball conversations with people.
You and me both.
Yes, some of us are experiencing this in very different ways. And so that's also something that we all need to be mindful of.
Yes.
We just concluded this statewide survey that the Attorney General's office partnered with Philanthropy Ohio and an OSU professor who happens to be on our advisory council, Aaron Beaton. And we had 7,700 charities in Ohio who responded to it, which is nearly 20% response rate. The survey was sent out to every registered charity that's in our database, and all Ohio charities, unless you're an exclusively religious organization, are required to register with us. And so we learned, surprisingly to me, I expected, and we intend to repeat this survey over time so we get a good picture about what the total impact has been on the charitable sector. I expected to see that the level of concern that charitable leaders would be experiencing would be something that would be increasing over time the longer that this goes on. However, what we learned from the survey is they're already at 11 now. So there's no ratcheting up as time goes by. So they're already very, very concerned. And by the way, you can find a copy of that survey report on the Attorney General's webpage at ohioattorneygeneral.org.gov, sorry. And so check it out, and thanks to everyone who responded. But they're already making changes. They're worried about making changes if they haven't already. I wonder if you could think out, putting yourself out, 3 to 6 months or maybe even longer. What predictions do you both have about how the sector is going to fare during this and what we'll see coming out the other end? What are your predictions, Elaine?
What I'm going to predict is Americans, Ohioans, we're generous people. And I think our charities, for the most part, will survive and thrive. I think we'll have some that will fall by the wayside, but I think those will be the folks who perhaps already were on shaky ground and who don't do that important stewardship of donors and thanking donors and having a plan and doing the things that we've all talked about. But I'm very confident. I look back on the recession of 08, 09, and a lot of people were doom and gloom worried, and charities came out stronger than ever. And I don't know that it's going to be in 6 months. It's going to be in a year, but I feel very confident that this is something that is very important to the American spirit, and we're going to do just great.
Michelle,
what
do you think?
I would echo that. I think moving forward, nonprofits have learned how to be quicker on their feet. I know one organization that had planned to implement telehealth, and it was a year down the road, and within 2 months, actually it was about 4 weeks, boom, they had it up and going. So I also think this is a time when nonprofits have been inspired by themselves and inspired for how quickly they've pivoted and how quickly they've been able to innovate. And so again, I think it lifts the teams, it lifts the organizations up. For those that are still continuing to struggle, I think those are the ones that are gonna, unfortunately, perhaps disappear. And we know that funders are wanting nonprofits to come together, the whole duplication of services. So those ones that are the strongest, that have been able to innovate, that have communicated, are going to move forward, and we're going to continue to see, I believe, more innovation, stronger sense of team, and donors and ask being made differently as well. It's not always going to be the face-to-face. Again, embracing this technology as well as conferences and even events are going to change. I don't think we'll see as many events. I think funders, sponsors are thinking, wow, I'd rather write a check and have that money go directly to the program or services as opposed to taking my evening away from my family and going to an event. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes, but a lot of good as well.
Yes.
I agree.
Well, we want to thank Elaine and Michelle so much for sharing their expertise with us today. Please reach out to OANO at info@oano.org. If you'd like any of the contact information of the speakers today, I'll get that right out to you as quickly as possible. It's info@oano.org. OANO would like to thank, of course, Beth Short and the Charitable Law Section of the Ohio Attorney General's Office. Thank you very much for this opportunity to help organizations across Ohio. We are looking forward to everyone seeing this, and I just wanted to thank everyone again. Beth?
Well, charities are so important in the life of our communities, and our working motto in the section is thriving charities and safe giving. And so we are anxious for charities to put their energies together and do things differently, which may improve things for them in the long run, and most importantly, improve things for those who are depending upon them for their programs and services. So we are grateful and respectful for everyone involved in the charitable sector, and so hope this serves as a useful tool. And I thank both Michelle and Elaine for helping to make the way perhaps a little clearer for some of them. So thank you.
Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you all. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Be well. Bye.
Have the rest of the day. Bye-bye.